Well, good evening and welcome to another community conversation in partnership with WMed and Mount Zion Baptist Church. We are honored that you are here tonight with us, wherever you're streaming around the world. Could you please do us a favor and share this? And also get your fingers ready to make sure that you're commenting so that we have a nice, robust conversation tonight, something that's beneficial to everybody. And if you have questions, thoughts regarding women's health, please put that in the chat. And you actually going to help a brother out if you do that so that we can keep this conversation moving tonight. We're honored that you are here joining us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come and to gather once again. And we know that it is your desire that we be in good health in our bodies just as our soul prospers. So thank you for this conversation. We know individuals are destroyed because of the lack of knowledge. So tonight, we look forward to gaining knowledge so that we can take care of these temples that you've entrusted us with the time that we have. So thank you for tonight's conversation. In Jesus' name. Amen. With great pleasure, I would love to introduce our panel on tonight. First of all the way to my right, returning once again. Feels like we got like a championship match. Returning one more time, we have Andrea Naud. Come on, put your hands together for her. She's, our online audience and in person. I love it. And then all the way to my left over here, we have Sokna Heather Mabin. She's with us tonight. She's a certified doula. And then coming over to my right, returning one more time, we have Dr. Diamond Stevens. Put your hands together for Dr. Diamond Stevens, OBGYN. Yes. And then over to my left, one of the community representatives, we have Cassandra 9 letters Stewart. Amen. She's with us here. Okay, Cassandra Stewart, her first name is 9 letters long. All right, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we do have an empty chair, so somebody may just magically appear as we get started tonight. Tonight's subject is women's health. Women's health. That seems like a pretty large subject, but there are some really specific things that might come to mind. When you hear that just topics of women's health, what specific things come to your mind, just in general, as it relates to women's health? And by the way, you might wonder, like, why is he up there by himself? Where is Pastor Moore? Like, where is he? He's not up here tonight. So I'm filling in for the both of us tonight with this conversation. That's why you got to give some questions so we can keep this thing moving. So I'm going to start over here to my left with Sokna Heather Mabin. You're with you're a certified doula. What specific things come to mind with the subject of women's health? I want to pick up your microphone there and turn it on, and here it is.
So I'm a doula, which is a labor support, birth support, prenatal educator. That's what I enjoy doing, and postpartum healing. I'm also an IBCLC, which is International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, so I support families in their education toward feeding their babies. When I think of women's reproductive health and maternal health, I think of the whole health of the child growing into the young woman, growing into the fertile woman in childbearing age, and after menopause, when she is moving on past her reproductive cycle. It's the whole health cycle, mental, emotional, spiritual health of a healthy woman who is continuously bringing in life to our planet. So in my role, I'm there to support from fertility on through childbearing age and even afterwards.
Wow. How long have you been in this role?
I've been a doula for 21 years.
21 years. Wow.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Stevens, how about you? With this subject of women's health, what comes to mind? There you go.
Okay. So that's a great question. I feel like Sokna worded it perfectly.
See, that
just
was
looking
great.
at the lifespan from, birth of female all the way through lifespan. So reproductive health overall, just general health and wellness, mental health. Speaking from the OBGYN standpoint, there's a lot of things that we manage when it comes to women's health. So definitely the birth process, prior to birth, prenatal care, following women after birth, in their what we call before periods, when they're having periods, postmenopausal state, and then kind of anything in between there as far as diagnoses, managing periods, managing postmenopausal symptoms, fibroids, PCOS, a lot of diagnoses come to mind from my OBGYN standpoint, management of those.
Awesome. So talk to us a little bit about the fibroids, Cassandra Stewart, as it relates to this women's health.
I am very familiar with that. I've experienced that for a period of time in my life. Having pain and not wondering where is that coming from? Why is that happening to me? Why do I feel that way? We talk about women's health and going through that, getting your period and everything. That was always an issue for me as well, and cramping tremendously during that time. So as I got older and found out, about, you have fibroids. So I'm like, well, what does that mean? How did I get them? Asking all of those questions just made me want to take care of myself more, but it's like, okay, what can I do to reduce this? And thankfully, I had a gynecologist that walked me through that process. They were able to try a few different options with me that seemed to help, but, they kept getting worse, if you will. So at that point, I was able to just go ahead and get a hysterectomy. I had already had my children, so I was fine with that decision, and because at that point, I just wanted to do whatever the doctor thought was best for me in order to alleviate that problem.
Thank you. Got a couple of responses here in the chat as it relates to women's health, breast cancer, is there more to that word? Osteoporosis, awesome, and menopause. So from a dietary standpoint, as a registered dietitian, what comes to your mind as it relates to this broad topic of women's health?
So I work at maternal fetal medicine at Bronson. So I work with ladies that are pregnant as well. So that comes to mind for sure. I do that every single day. And then also osteoporosis for sure, I think is very important. That is more women specific. It's just more common in women, so that's something I think we should be aware of and talk about. And prevention for that even starts in adolescence. So as far back as then, we really do need to be thinking about nutrition and women's health. We mentioned the lifespan already, so what we do at every stage in our life really does influence the next stage in our life when it comes to nutrition. So fertility too, nutrition related to fertility is important.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So let's do this, and as we do this, let's welcome Dr. Sharita Roque. Come on, put your hands together for Dr. Sharita Roque. Thank you for joining us on tonight. How are you?
Sorry, I'm late.
Go put that up there. Say it again.
I'm good. Sorry, I'm a bit late.
I just told everybody you were going to magically appear. We didn't say you were late. No.
Yes, magically appeared.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. So let's do this. Let's start the conversation from maybe the youngest that we can start talking about women's health. And what do parents need to be mindful of as it relates to young ladies' women's health? So does women's health start as a baby, or does it start maybe with the adolescence? When does this topic really start? And I guess what do parents need to be mindful of?
So I like to begin in the concept of fertility, because doula supports the mother. We have the OBGYNs tracing the pregnancies and the pediatricians and everyone, but I'm really there as a non-medical person supporting the mother. And research has shown us that a female fetus, so the baby, in the mother's belly, when the mother's pregnant with her, the female fetus already has her eggs. So where does this start? When I'm tending the mother, if she's pregnant with a female child, then I really like to encourage her, and I start saying, taking care of your health is taking care of your grandchildren. And that is very wide and expansive for people to think that way, but isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And so we can start with, as science proves this information for us, we can start changing how we're changing our health, observing ourselves, eating well, exercising, and taking care of our bodies, literally for our grandchildren. But we can also start with, when we're pregnant, eating better, keeping up with our prenatal appointments, making changes, healthy changes that we need to make sure that we have a healthy family, and honoring our children as we have them and answering their questions truthfully, guiding them through the process of growing up and being confident in their bodies.
Yeah. So as it relates to women and pregnancy, particularly here in Kalamazoo, there's a high rate of infant mortality as it relates to our young black babies. So what can we do to be more successful in that, to help that number go down in that pregnancy stage so that there's more successful pregnancies?
Yes. I really encourage our families to keep up with their prenatal appointments. If they don't feel comfortable going to their appointments by themselves, if they need some support, ask for help. Ask their doula to come and see them, or a relative who can maybe support them. But definitely keep those appointments, maintain that, because they're watching the growth of the baby, they're looking at the mother's health and making sure that she's eating properly, making sure that the heartbeat is, her heartbeat, her heart rate, her blood pressure is healthy. She doesn't have diabetes. Things can come up in pregnancy. But
Gotcha.
where do you think, Diamond? I'm thinking that you'd be great to answer
Dr.
that.
Diamond Stevens, ladies and gentlemen.
So, no, I agree with you. Prenatal appointments are important, of course, us from the OBGYN standpoint. And then also, as a patient, just advocating for yourself if there's anything bothersome to you or symptoms that appear. It's always important to let your OBGYN know so that we can look into it further if there are risk factors, present that would concern us of, maternal or fetal potential harm. It requires more management workup from our end. No, I do agree with that it really starts with the prenatal visits, having a doula, having people to be in your corner as well. I know there's been different practices, I guess, in the community offer like group settings of going through prenatal care, and there's been some studies that show like overall outcomes for like low socioeconomic status individuals or minority individuals, are better outcomes for them and babies by having those group settings where they talk about those concerns and kind of just bring up things throughout their pregnancy.
Dr. Roque, look like you're trying to get in here.
The other thing that I would add is that I think that people sometimes there are a lot of things that we can help with when you come to your OBGYN. And if you share your particular situation, we can get social work involved. We can link people up with additional resources, but we can't if we don't know that you need those things. And so that's something that I feel like if people feel open with sharing their actual circumstances, then there are lots of things that are available, but we just don't necessarily know how to help that person and how to get the resources to them that need it.
Gotcha. In 2016, my wife and I, we were pregnant with a girl. Her name was Christina Michelle Moore. But my wife experienced preeclampsia, and we ended up losing our baby. So what could individuals do to help with preeclampsia, eclampsia? I don't even know if this is related, but it's in the question, toxema. So what can individuals do? Because my wife did keep up with all of her appointments, prenatal care, the vitamins, and the support group and all of that. So is there anything that individuals can do?
First, I'm sorry that you had that experience. And thank you for talking about it, because I feel like that's something that people don't talk about a lot. There are things that people can do, definitely. One of the things is actually taking baby aspirin. That's one of the things that can be preventive. and prevent the development of preeclampsia, preeclamptic toxemia, which is the older name for it, and eventually preeclampsia. So there are things people can do. And there's people, when people have certain risk factors, then your doctor may say, like, we recommend that you take this medication. But that's one of the main things.
Gotcha. Yeah, my wife, she was advised to do that. And in 2020, we had a little boy, Cameron Michael Moore. He came on into the world. But yeah, baby aspirin definitely was a recommendation. Anything else dietary-wise to help with those types of unfortunate circumstances?
So with preeclampsia, a part of that is usually high blood pressure. And so when we think of high blood pressure outside of pregnancy, typically the recommendation would be lower sodium diet. During pregnancy, though, we don't necessarily want a woman to go really low in sodium, because then we run the risk of their blood levels going too low in sodium, and that is dangerous as well. So really, the recommendation if a woman has high blood pressure during pregnancy would to be consuming a moderate sodium intake, so not trying to cut it way, way down, but maybe just being aware, not eating a lot of junk food that has a lot of salt, but still including some salt in your diet.
Gotcha. So the baby's born now. So what subjects as it relates to women's health happens after a baby's born? And how do we address those, you know, like the postpartum stuff? Yeah, it's kind of like Family Feud, you know, everybody. Ready? Go.
So that's a great question. So with postpartum care, so definitely matters what happened in the prenatal course for the individual and during their kind of delivery process as well, to figure out a great plan for that patient as far as like follow-up, timing of follow-up, and things we should definitely talk about. But kind of standardly at a prenatal visit, we talk definitely about mood. It would be a major thing that we talk about. How are things going at home? How's the baby? How's support for that mom? Are they breastfeeding or formula feeding? How that's going? Going through kind of the organ systems, making sure that there's no concerns there for the patient. How's their pain since delivery? So kind of overall, kind of a generalized thing to just how they're doing overall. It pertains to everything that happened in the delivery and kind of prenatal, of course.
Let's talk about this lactation part, the breastfeeding, to give them the liquid gold.
Yeah, the liquid gold.
Yeah.
So breastfeeding and chest feeding is the food that we make from our bodies for our babies. And we do have a choice how we're going to feed our babies, right? There's breastfeeding, there's expressing the milk if somebody doesn't want to latch their baby. There's combination feeding with breastfeeding and bottle feeding with formula or express breast milk or breast milk and formula. There is exclusive formula feeding, and they all have different effects on the baby. And so my favorite thing to do is educate a family, because I want people to make informed decisions, and you only make that informed decision when you know what you're doing, when you know what the choices are. Yeah. Breastfeeding for the mother reduces her risks of breast cancer and cervical cancer and ovarian cancer. Breastfeeding reduces risks of diabetes in the parent, in the child. Colostrum, which is the liquid gold, which if you have a vaginal birth, liquid gold is there for 2 to 3 days. If you have a belly birth, a cesarean, which I had both, so I'm speaking from experience, your colostrum will be there for anywhere from 3 to 5 days. And it is the expression of your milk that makes more milk. So often people think they don't have enough milk. You gotta feed that baby 8 to 16 times a day, including the night. You gotta constantly express milk and empty the breast to make more milk. But it has health benefits for the mother. It has health benefits for the infant. It lowers obesity. It increases immunity. Liquid gold, breast milk is full of stem cells. So it's loading the baby up with all of these cells that can become anything to help protect them in their life. So there's so much we can talk about with breastfeeding. That's the first choice a parent has, is how am I going to feed my baby?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Reverend Christopher.
Yes.
As I sit here and I'm listening to everyone, and we talk about women's health, and you talk about how amazing the body is, and I'm a member of Mount Zion Church, and we can't sit here and acknowledge God as our creator and the spirit that's in all of us. And when it comes to us recreating, we know that's God at work. And I listened, to everything. I experienced a miscarriage in between the two children that I had. I breastfed. I chose to breastfeed both of my children because I looked at that as that is what God intended. That's how, and I know everyone doesn't make that choice, and that's fine. But that's how I looked at it. And I think not only in our physical health that we need to be aware of, I also think it's our spiritual health. And I think that is a guiding factor sometimes, in our physical health. God talks about, our body is a temple and how we need to take care of it, and, how gluttony is, a sin. So I think I know he has made a way for us in following Christ. That's my choice. That's for me. And, of course, it's open for everyone. But those things are so important. So as I listen to each one of you and I think of all the different things you've said, in the body of Christ, you can get that. You can get that support when you're pregnant. You can have that foundation for somebody to be there with you. I had a sister that experienced postpartum depression. I'm thankful and grateful that I didn't. So it was a little hard for me to understand. So I always kept her lifted in prayer. But again, I always feel like I go back to my spiritual foundation, and that's what helps me get through whatever may come my way. Sometimes people ask that question, well, why did that happen to me? Why did I lose my child? And I'm thankful I didn't go through it or look at it that way. I felt like if God is in control. God is in control of my life, so he knows what's best for me and for my child, unborn and after they are born.
Well
so I
said.
just really want to bring that to the forefront as well as we talk about women's health. Start with that spiritual health, and it will help guide you through and get you through anything that you are going through physically.
Well said. Question here, how long is it appropriate? How long is it appropriate to breastfeed? I think I said it right. The question.
You can breastfeed as long as you want. As long as you feel good, as long as you and your baby want to, need to. The longer you breastfeed. So there's science, the World Health Organization, the CDC, the world really suggests breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months. The baby doesn't need anything else. Breast milk is 80% water and all of the other most incredible nutrients that your baby could need. Then there's comfort, right, and what the baby needs and if you're able to keep up with it. But your baby does not need anything. Water is not healthy for newborn babies, for small babies. They should only have breast milk. The rest of the world really on average is breastfeeding their babies anywhere from 2 to 3 years, even 5 years. So it really depends on where we are culturally and how that's accepted. That will come in to your comfort level, but I always encourage families to breastfeed for as long as they wish. And that it really accentuates that bonding that you're talking about, that skin-to-skin connection. Your baby comes from your body to your chest, and you're there to learn who your baby is and respond to their cues and their comfort and their needs. And so we are given love and we're given comfort, and it lowers our risks of depression and anxiety because of the hormones that are released to breastfeed. So there's all kinds of benefits.
Question, one more for you, is where can someone go if they have an interest in being an African-American doula? How do you do that?
So there are different organizations that are training to be doulas. Some are online. Some are here in Kalamazoo. I know that Rooted offers doula training. I am also a doula trainer, Mama Sutra Loving Arts. However, I have traveled to become a doula. When I became a doula 20 years ago, I had to travel to Ann Arbor because no one was here yet. And I traveled to study with Patty Brennan, who is with DONA, the Doulas of North America Association. However, now we have Ancient Song in Brooklyn, who does incredible birth justice work. There's all kinds of organizations. I say Google doula training and see which one looks interesting to you, and you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I can help you make some decisions or at least offer information.
Thank you. One more question as it relates to birth and babies. What happens when the baby does not come through the vaginal canal, the vaginal birth? Does the baby miss microbes from the mother's vaginal canal? So does the baby miss out if there's a cesarean?
So it is definitely a different experience for the baby to come via C-section versus a vaginal delivery. They're squeezed a lot with a vaginal delivery, which is actually a good thing. So that actually can help them in some ways too, kind of produce a stress response, we call it. And then that can actually be beneficial also. That's not to say that like there are tons of babies born via C-section and they're perfectly wonderful. So it's not saying that like one is necessarily better than the other. It's just that like whatever circumstance led to the patient needing a C-section probably merited that, and so merited the C-section. And you balance risks benefits. So the goal is to have like healthy babies, healthy pregnant people, not pregnant people anymore, at the end as well.
Gotcha. So let's talk about that. As the baby grows older and the young lady, she's growing into herself and she hits puberty. So what do parents need to know? Of course, if you're a woman, you probably already know this, but you got dads watching too. So what do parents need to know and be aware of as it relates to women's health?
Can I start a little bit before puberty?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, teach me.
So calcium intake is very, very important for women. We have a much higher risk of osteoporosis and
what's that, by the way?
like bone health, so brittle bone disorder. And so little kids typically are given milk and they drink milk. But as they start to get older, they start drinking less milk, more juice. Maybe they're drinking sports drinks now and pop. And so that displaces that calcium intake. And so really, once we are in our early 20s to mid 20s is when we get the most calcium that we can get into our bones. So that occurs very young. Once we're in our 30s, our bones really cannot hold any more calcium than they already do. And so it's really important to build up that calcium store in our bone when we're younger. And so having that good calcium intake as a child all the way through early adulthood is very, very important, especially for young girls.
There's a question actually related to that. Do supplements help with this? And is magnesium, is that helpful for osteoporosis?
So I would not suggest taking a calcium unless talking to your doctor first, especially something like calcium or vitamin D. You definitely would want lab work done first to see if you actually need those supplements. I would really focus on nutrition first and trying to make sure you're eating foods that contain calcium. If you're lactose intolerant, you can eat other foods like green leafy veggies and broccoli. Both do have calcium in them as well, or fortified products like fortified orange juice that has calcium in it would be a good option too.
Gotcha. Okay. So then as the young lady's building up calcium in her body, and she goes to school one day and hits puberty. So what do parents now need to know, to be aware of as it relates to taking care of this young lady's health?
Just one thing I want to add about that real quick, and then I'll let somebody else talk.
Yeah.
So as we're getting ready to enter puberty, we see some weight gain. So a little bit of fat is put on. That is completely normal. That is supposed to happen. And I think sometimes parents or good-meaning people in a child's life don't realize that, or even the child doesn't realize that, and they think that they're getting fat, or someone points it out that, oh, you're getting a little big, aren't you? And that can be detrimental to a child's mental health and can lead to eating disorders sometimes. So I think just really understanding that it is completely normal. You're supposed to put on that fat during that time, and then we don't really want to necessarily draw a lot of attention to it in a negative way.
That's the first time I ever heard that in my whole life. Wow, that's amazing.
Um, One thing I think is important when thinking about a young girl starting puberty is making sure that that topic is not something that's like taboo and that you want to not necessarily talk about with them. I just know of patients in the past, and even my own experience of like starting my period and my parents not telling me what that actually was, and the experience you go through when it starts and you have no idea what's happening to you. So I think it's really important to be open with those conversations with your child, and that this is normal and this is a part of the process of, growing into adulthood. So just making sure it's not taboo.
Awesome.
I agree with that. Also, just that a lot of black girls undergo puberty earlier than, for instance, like their white peers. And so kind of being ready for that too, and that, yes, they may have a different experience than some of their friends in school, and just making that normal for them as well, and letting them feel free, as Dr. Stephen said, to ask any questions that they have.
Yeah. I think you've answered it, but just a question again, so what do dads need to know? Like, so dad has a little girl now, and she's growing up. What would you tell the daddy?
Well, I like to ask any parent, have they not gone through puberty? I don't want to be rude about it, but I just find it really fascinating that people think that they haven't gone through this experience. It's a different side of it, right? We can be someone's daughter, but then suddenly we're also a mother. We can be someone's child, and then suddenly we're an adult and we are giving birth to somebody else. It's our turn to share this information with the people that we have made. And I think that when we have healthy conversations in the family with our daughters and their fathers, that is a wonderful relationship to foster toward adult relationships, intimate relationships, and how they can be a part of their own children's lives. It's a kind of a rite of passage, be able to talk about becoming a sexual person, because they're going to have children if they want them. And if they don't, they're still going to go through all the processes that mature their bodies. You know, we're babies, and then we're toddlers, and then we're young people, and then we're adults, and then we're going to be elders. So we've never looked the same. We have all the different phases of life, hopefully, when we have a long, healthy life.
Yeah.
It's normal.
So a question about the cycle. Is there anything to be concerned with if your cycle length is shorter than 28 days, so your cycles are more frequent?
If your cycles are less than 28 days, can still be normal if it's like 26, 27, something like that. As long as it's consistent, that could be normal for that patient. But the concern is if they're irregular and they're coming at random times, that's definitely something that people should see their OBGYN, their doctor about, because that could be very concerning. And there are different reasons why that could be happening. Sometimes there are hormone imbalances, and there are medications that we can give, which are often birth control methods, actually, that can help regulate the periods. And that's important because that actually can protect. When people have irregular bleeding, one of the things that can happen is that it could be a sign, among other things, of endometrial cancer. And so that's a big thing that we want to know about, right? So you want to be able to diagnose that early to do things about it. And so absolutely patients should come in if they have irregular bleeding, because there's so many reasons that they could be due to, and there's so many things that we can do about it as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
I want to
Are there any non-prescriptive ways that they can deal with that? Non-medication ways?
I mean, it really just depends on what the actual cause of the issue is, and until we sit down and have a thorough conversation, then we could figure it out. But yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I want to speak to that because, I mean, when I can remember starting my cycle, like I said, I had a lot of issues with it. It wasn't that it was irregular, but I just felt like it was like way too long and way too heavy, and I was in a lot of pain. And one of the things that finally, I mean, I was way much older, late teens, before I realized that birth control pills would have saved me a lot of trouble had I known about that and how it was able, it helped not only like regulate it, which that wasn't the problem, but it helped with the pain. And just making it, you know, and I kept thinking to myself, why on earth did no one ever tell me about this? But back to Reverend Chris, what you said about, it's really about talking, whether you're a father or a mother. When that female child is starting, I was the youngest of 5 with 4 girls and 1 boy. And you would think that that would be common conversation, if you will, in the household, but it wasn't. And I remember, you know, starting and I didn't tell my mother till it was late when she got off work at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, Mom, you know, I think I started, like, what do I do? And I will never forget, she sent my brother to the store, and I was so embarrassed for him. And it's like, why would you do that to him? But just talk, have that conversation, not just at that moment, but start that conversation, make that something normal as a part of the family. So when this does happen or whatever else may happen, they already feel comfortable. And as a parent, you become more comfortable with talking to your child with whatever situation it is.
Awesome. Thank you. A couple of questions to kind of go back a little bit. If you had a C-section, can you have a vaginal birth after safely?
So it depends on the reason for your C-section, but for most people, yes. There are different factors that come into play, and again, this is all a conversation that you would have with your doctor. But sometimes we do a C-section because the baby's in a position that would make having a vaginal delivery really, really risky. And so, but that's not a reason that they can't try for a vaginal delivery in the future, because I mean, there was no even attempt at a vaginal delivery. So they may have a really, really good chance of having a vaginal delivery. If someone wasn't able to dilate, they only got to about 3 centimeters instead of 10, then maybe that we could try again, but that maybe they are not going to get past that again. So it just depends on the situation. But it's definitely not every person who has a C-section needs to have another C-section.
And our follow-up question, are C-sections really necessary?
So I think that's a great question. So there's many indicated or reasons that we feel that it is safest for mom and baby to proceed with a C-section. So it kind of depends on the situation, and everyone's labor process is a little bit different. And just making sure with your labor process you understand if a physician is recommending a C-section, why that is. But it does really, really depend. But for reasons that they are performed for indicated or reasons that we feel is safe for mom and baby.
Thank you. Another question, how do you find out if you have endometriosis? Did I say that correctly? Oh, wow. And does it cause problems with pregnancy? So how do you find out if you have that?
Endometriosis is a condition in which people can have basically like parts of the lining of the uterus is in other places in the pelvis, so in the abdomen, and so with each cycle can have a lot of pain with each cycle. And so there are a bunch of different symptoms that people can have, but the only real way to actually diagnose it is to actually do surgery, is to look inside the belly and to see if we see any of these pieces of tissue where they're not supposed to be. Because surgery is a big hurdle, a lot of times we'll start with treating people and see if they respond to the treatment. And so if we give medications and people get better, then they say that's probably what it was, but then you're already doing better, so we just can stay the course. So that's how we actually diagnose it. But a lot of times, like I said, we were able to treat it without having a formal diagnosis.
So how does a person come to the point where they say, you know, or the doctor, you may have endometriosis, so let's start with these treatments before surgery? What are those symptoms?
What are the symptoms?
Yes.
So people can have pain with bowel movements. They can have pain with intercourse. They can have extremely painful periods as well. They can have actually like trouble with their bowels as well, because these implants can be anywhere in the abdomen. Can have like pain is really one of the main symptoms.
Gotcha.
And one of the things that actually helps a lot is birth control pills, or a birth control method that will regulate periods, because then if people aren't going through the menstrual cycle, then they're not having that worsening of symptoms with each month.
And a follow-up question to endometriosis, is there a connection between uterine cancer or a uterine cancer risk and endometriosis?
That's a great question. So, from my understanding with endometriosis, so there's, it has some links to a specific type of ovarian cancer, like a clear cell ovarian cancer, but not to my knowledge is it associated with an endometrial cancer. But again, something that is pretty rare.
Okay. Now, we have a lot of good questions here. Do teenage girls need HPV vaccines before they are matured?
Cervical cancer is one of the major killers worldwide. And it's really a privilege that we have a vaccine that can help prevent that. And so any vaccine is a choice, but it is very much so recommended, because it can drastically decrease people's risk for cervical cancer.
Gotcha. So we got the young lady, she's born, she hit puberty, now she's, growing up. So let's talk about stress. How does stress affect health problems in women? Because one of the things somebody talked about is mental health as well. So how does stress affect health? And we've asked 100 of them. Okay.
And I don't have anything specific in terms of stress, other than it just makes everything worse. You know
what? It does, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, keep going, yeah.
And so it can, like if someone has eczema and they're under stress, then it can make eczema worse. Any condition that anyone has, it can just make things worse. And so there's nothing really specific, but it's just important to manage. Mental health is real. It's part of health.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Again, going back, I try to eliminate stress in my life, because we know it affects our health, our mental health, and also physically. I've experienced people, going through trauma, if you will, on their job, and they're just, they have stomach aches, they have headaches all the time. So when you're dealing with a lot of stress, or in your life, whether it's trauma caused or whatever, from work, it can show up, negatively in your body. I know that, and again, I revert back to I know how to turn that over, and I think that's important for especially women to know, because I think we tend to carry so much for our children, for our families. If we're working women, in the job, people have told me, well, Cassandra, you're just like that. You're motherly, and it's just like a part of me. But with that, sometimes you tend to take on that stress, or maybe even something that someone else is going through. So for me, having that outlet that I know that I can go to God and prayer. I think prayer is one of the main things that helps me deal with stress, if I'm going through a stressful situation, God says, turn all my cares over to him. And because I'm able to do that, I think it allows me to deal with whatever is coming at me with a totally different perspective. Therefore, I don't feel like, oh, that's stressing me out now. So it can affect you physically, in addition to mentally, but God can take care of all of that. So just remember
Absolutely.
that.
So we got a lot of questions now as it relates to menopause. So what is menopause? And then there are several questions to follow up with that.
Well, I'm a doula, but I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And so I just would love to actually speak to that personally from my experience. I'm a menopausal woman now, and it's the ceasing of our menses, so the end of our menstrual cycle. And it begins after 1 full year of not having a period. It's the next phase of life. So what I'm learning in my own experience is there's still heat cycles. There's still mood swings and all the things. Perimenopause takes a little time. It takes time to shift from being a person who has been bleeding for years of fertility to make children to suddenly not. It doesn't just switch off overnight. There are emotional cycles. We can have mental fluctuations, forgetfulness. And what I've learned is in my study, I'm also a clinical herbalist, and I have really been observing this in my body with different ways to manage my experience in menopause and perimenopause. But I'm thinking of the heat cycles of little kids, and they come in and they're all sweating and fast and everything. It's a really exciting, hot time. And then and they're fast, they're growing quickly. And then there's adolescence, breaking out of the skin and heat and how it shows up in the body. And then there are heat flashes in pregnancy. Women walking around the middle of winter, I'm hot. Cows open and it's blustery outside. There's heat cycles all along. And then there's heat cycles in menopause as well. These phases are the same, they just show up differently. And as a menopausal woman, I'm really observing that now. I do actually remember in my mid-40s when I started to I feel different. The weight is there again. Fat babies, we love that, right? And fat toddlers. And then we have weight when we are becoming adolescents because our hormones are shifting and our body's changing, and we need that fat and we need that cushions on our joints as we're growing, softness and oils in the body. Then we get a little juicy again in menopause. Why do we keep putting on these weight in these transitional phases? Now menopause is getting a lot of attention because we want to talk about it. Because women are like, wait, I need to know this. There's a lot of science, but it just hasn't been given to us, and women are discovering what it is. It's a fascinating time.
Yeah.
It's the time of the elder woman, and I'm really loving it. I love talking to my elders.
Yeah.
We need to talk to our mothers and our grandmothers and the people. They have so much information for us.
So about that, one of the heat cycles, one of the question is there anything that you can do to help with the night sweats?
Just before you hop into that, I found sleeping in cotton and natural fabrics, natural cotton sheets are really, really helpful. Anything that was synthetic, polyester, anything with the blend set me on fire. So also things that you eat, you have to watch your own body and see what is aggravating. Aggravating, talking about the stress, the word aggravation kept coming to me. Things that are aggravating, irritating, try to remove those out of your life for a little while or lessen them. And then you really do start to bring in your own self-care. This is the new brand, right? But what is bringing in our own peace? What do we enjoy? We need that at times of transition for us to be not aggravated or aggravated as little as possible.
Thank you. So follow-up question to that or more questions. Should you take hormone supplements to help with menopause symptoms? And I think that's a good question. Thank you so much for putting that in.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Can I borrow yours? There we go. That's going to help.
That's a great question. Just kind of to back up to going through menopause, I agree with Sokna. definition that she mentioned, so it'll be a year without periods. Something commonly, especially I've kind of noticed in the Black community, and even like with my own family, of women going through menopause and kind of they just deal with the symptoms, and that's what they're taught. But I think, you can see your gynecologist throughout all phases of life. So seeing your gynecologist is important to talk about those symptoms you're having, because we do have lots of different management options, and one of those does include hormonal replacement therapy. And of course that would depend on kind of your risk factors, your medical history, to see if that would be safe for you. But that is kind of one of the methods. We also have medications that manage those, what we call vasomotor symptoms, so those heat flashes that are not necessarily hormonal medications, but different kind of forms of medication. So talking to your gynecologist about methods that we have to offer can really help with those symptoms that you're going through.
So another question as far as the hormones. Can you discuss hormone decreases in older women's health? Is that a thing? And then what do women do if they have hormone decreases?
Reference to perimenopause?
I'm not sure.
I mean, in perimenopause, so that's around menopause. So it starts average age of menopause being 51. So sometimes in the mid 40s, can start to have some of those symptoms of menopause. And really the things that we would treat would be the things that are bothersome. And so if a patient is bothered by something, then we'll work on finding a solution, fixing it. But if something isn't bothersome, if switching to cotton sheets, to organic materials is enough for the night sweats, then we don't need to do anything else because they have a solution and they're good with that. But if they're not good with that, then we keep going further. So it's
Gotcha.
all a conversation on person-specific circumstance.
Okay.
I'll just toss something on top of that, there are changes. Changes are normal. I recommend continue to educate yourself. There are phenomenal podcasts and information and books about menopause. It's a very, very hot topic right now. And the parts of our bodies, the thyroid, the ovaries, the different parts of our bodies begin to put out different amounts of hormones at different stages. So is that what she's asking? Because it can be just the changes in our body. They're putting things out differently. The quantities are different. But we don't become
So the
something
quantity
else.
difference, would you call that hormone imbalance? Is that what people call that, when there's different quantities of hormones?
That would be individual, right?
People talk about hormone imbalances in relationship to something called polycystic ovary syndrome. And so that's something that would affect someone more so during their reproductive years. And that's also nuanced in terms of its treatment. But one of the mainstays of it is birth control methods again, to
Okay.
help with regulating hormones.
How would they know then if their hormones are imbalanced?
It would really depend on someone's symptoms, but it could be a lot of different things. So if someone is having, for instance, hair changes, or they're hot when other people are cold, or cold when other people are hot, those could be thyroid problems. There could be a lot of different things, and it's hard to say it without a real conversation.
Gotcha. A couple of more questions, and then we'll get ready to conclude. We're about 6 minutes away from our end. What happens when a woman over 50 starts losing calcium when going through menopause? Do you have, and I guess there's another part of the question, do you have swelling and tender areas? So you talked about calcium earlier and making sure young girls build calcium. Then at a certain point, you can't get any more. So what happens when you start losing it? Oh, I forgot to give you the
That's
mic.
okay.
It's sitting right there.
So they're asking what happens when you start losing it? Like what?
Yes.
Okay, like what they should do?
Yes.
So there's really, the only way that you would know, I guess, if you're losing calcium would be to follow up with your doctor and get that lab work done. And trying to focus again on diet for sure to increase your calcium intake. At that point, your doctor may recommend taking an additional calcium supplement to help. Fun fact about calcium, it actually fights for absorption in the body with iron. So if you are taking a calcium supplement or you're really worried about your calcium levels, you want to try to take that supplement or eat those calcium-rich foods at a different time than you're eating iron-rich foods, which would be like meat, for example, has a lot of iron. So that's probably where I would start from the nutrition standpoint. And also exercise can really help strengthen bones as well.
Awesome. Yes, doctor.
Specifically weight-bearing exercise. So the weight-bearing part of it is really important. So like getting out there with the weights and everything definitely helps with bone health.
Top notch.
In the beginning, breastfeeding helps with calcium deposits later in life. So there's a whole thing with babies don't have a lot of iron, and then breast milk is carrying over the iron that the infant needs later. However, a breastfeeding woman has a deposit of calcium in her body later, and breastfeeding reduces the risk of osteoporosis. Spirit has a plan. This is when I'm like, this is designed so well. It is just so fascinating that the continuation of life when following the natural course of the body is provided for. It is one of the things that I always think of with breastfeeding. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
It supports the mother.
Awesome. We're about 3 minutes away. We're getting ready to come to a close. Just a quick yes or no question. Do you need to have a GYN exam or pap smears after 50? Say again.
Yes.
I also agree with that. Yes. 100%
Awesome.
yes.
So as we conclude, I mean, things that we did talk about or did not talk about that you think are important, that you want to bring out as far as a last statement. I'm going to start with you, our doula. And if you don't mind, as you make your last statement, we do have one more question for you. Is there a cost to be a doula?
Doula trainings span the financial pole from a couple of $100s to thousands of dollars. I have been training and cross-training for years. There are so many styles. There's prenatal, there's postpartum, there's birth doulas, now there are death doulas. Full spectrum doula covers everything. Once again, I recommend Googling what is a doula, look at the different organizations that teach, and find one that looks good to you.
Awesome.
So my closing remark is reproductive health of the woman is the whole woman's life. The whole life of the female child of the female body and all the incredible landscapes that a woman experiences in her life. It's forever. Yes, see a doctor after 50 because you still have female parts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
I agree with that. Just because you turn 50 doesn't mean you shouldn't see a doctor for those things. One thing I think that we did not touch on this evening was breast cancer. And that kind of runs in my father's side of the family in the women. So I just think that's something else that we really need to be aware of as women when it
Awesome.
comes to our health.
Yes. Thank you.
So.
Dr. Stevens.
Yeah, I guess like a general statement, I agree women's health starts from birth all the way through the lifespan. There's lots of resources out there, including your OBGYN, to help you through that process. Me specifically, I'm going into pediatric and adolescent gynecology, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's important when those, if your child or adolescent has problems arise, that there are doctors there to talk about those things with them. So just finding a doctor for you or whatever resource you want, even through early like childhood for that girl or in adolescence. So I think those are important things. Overall wellness is important, including mental health throughout the lifespan when it comes to women's health. And then we didn't talk about breast cancer, which I think is really important. And a lot of women that, don't go to the doctor regularly, lots of barriers to get into a doctor sometimes, and I understand that. Important to know that mammograms, depending on your risk factors, but generally for the population, they should be done starting at 40, sometimes even earlier, given because of medical reasons. And then by our American College of OBGYN should be done annually, so yearly.
Awesome. Sound advice. Thank you.
One thing we did not talk about, and it just came to me, is diabetes. While it can affect both men and women, it certainly affects women as well. And thinking about pregnancy, it can certainly affect pregnancy outcomes too. And so if you're a woman of childbearing age and you want to have a baby and you have diabetes, it's really important to make sure your blood sugars are under control and in that good, healthy range prior to becoming pregnant to reduce risk for complications. And if you haven't seen a doctor in a while, you may not know if you have diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes. So it is important to go to those regular checkups and make sure you're staying on top of that prior to becoming pregnant.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
There are a lot of things that people are dealing with and managing without necessarily coming to their doctor with the concerns. For instance, a lot of people think that they're alone in miscarriage when it's 1 in 4 pregnancies. A lot of people are dealing with miscarriage as well and have had that in their experience. And there are things that people also are managing, such as urinary incontinence and pain with intercourse. And there's so many things that we can do. But if you don't talk about these things with your doctor, then you're not going to get those solutions. And there's so many solutions, and they're very common.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this incredible conversation. If you don't mind, a studio audience, come on, put your hands together for Dr. Sharika Roque. Come on, put your hands together. Andrea Nowd, thank you for being with us again. Dr. Diamond Stevens, Sister Cassandra Stewart, and Sokna Heather Mabin. Thank you for being with us tonight, and we look forward to our next community conversation. Let's pray. Father, we thank you tonight for what we've learned, and we know that you made us meticulously. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. You called us a marvelous work, and we thank you that you've given us information to take care of these temples that you've given unto us so that we can use them for your glory because they belong to you. So as we continue, we'll make better and healthy choices, advocating for health and for our health, so that we can make a difference, positive impact in the lives of others. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this health community conversation, and we'll see you next time.